Welcome to the Sharp Boy Show. So happy to have you here this evening. And yes, it is a little bit past 7 p.m. on the East Coast. So what does that mean? You have to look at my mug. You were thinking you didn't, but you do. I both make the rules and enforce them. So you must absolutely do that. So please let people know that you are watching this. And if you happen to be watching this on Twitter, if you're on Twitter right now and you're watching it, I need you to do me a favor. Share this on Twitter. Retweet this. Why are you looking at me? Retweet. You should be doing that right now. Retweet this now. If you're on Twitter, you know that we want to grow our Twitter because we have to, because now Elon, I guess, likes me again, I guess. I don't know. But anyway, we have to do it. So make sure you do it. Please do that. It is important that you do that. Tonight, I am very lucky. I have with me someone who I think likes Star Wars more than me. That is awesome. I'm glad we have someone who I think does. He is an author. He's a host, he's a media personality, and he's the author of the book, if I get it right, The Force Can Fix the World. He'll correct me if I'm wrong. The man himself, Stephen Kent. How are you?
Hey, Larry. Good to see you.
Did I get the title right?
Almost. How the Force Can Fix the World. And so everybody always asks me, question number one, well, Stephen, how can the Force fix the world? And I'm like, well, you know, that's like a couple hours of content.
Yeah, it's a book. I know the audio book is like 6 hours long. So yes, it's literally 6 hours long.
I got to like chapter 5 and I was still like, I don't know if I've figured out yet how. I'm going to keep going.
But there were cool stories, so I think that part's good.
Yes, very much.
So that's something. No matter what, look, even if it's all wrong, at least the stories are good. So that's something.
I gotta say, I love your Darth Vader and Yoda on the table there behind you, little guys. Little guys. You mentioned, and I might love Star Wars more than you do. I had this 3D printed for my Substack followers.
Wow.
And you know, did a little giveaway. It's not actual bronze, but you know, it does look like it. We all worship something. So
there we go. No, I see you've got the Falcon there right next to you also. I see. Yes, absolutely. Yes, I only have a Yoda and a Darth Vader because I am a gray Jedi of the highest order. So that is why
you've been removed from the canon.
That's why I have to go with both of them, because I'm a gray Jedi. That's the reason why. So yes. So in any case,
classic libertarian response.
Bingo. For those of you who want to follow Stephen, you should please head over to his website, Stephen D. Kent. And if you are listening to this only, it's Stephen with a PH. And D is the letter D. So StephenDKent.com. On Twitter, you can follow him at Stephen, again, PH _ Kent 89. So you can follow him there. The question I have for you, though, the book is actually far more serious than it sounds. Right? It sounds almost like it's a parody or it's a joke or something. That's how it sounds, right?
A little bit.
But in reality, I feel like the book is, at its core, it's about choice. Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong at all. The book is, at its core, a call towards self-improvement and trying to get people who love Star Wars to think about it as more than mere entertainment. Now, a lot of people who follow Star Wars very closely, they are the type of people who like look at it and talk about it as if it is a lifestyle, as if it is a philosophy, because Star Wars is borrowing from so much international philosophy and history that make up its moral universe. So Star Wars fans sort of naturally think about it that way. They think about the Force as something relatively serious. And when Yoda says, do or do not, there is no try, they go, that's actually a good way to think about, you know, putting in effort on things. Like, you really got to go for it. So this book was about taking Star Wars seriously, taking its wisdom seriously, and going, all right, if I had these 3 problems in the world, political polarizations, civic institutions collapsing, and relationships across the world falling apart and loneliness destroying people's lives, how would I look to this thing that I love, Star Wars, for a solution? Because there's plenty of books out there that, you know, apply political solutions and government solutions. I write those articles and they're very important, but I love Star Wars. And I actually think that Star Wars has wisdom that could make the world a better place.
Well, but you bring up a more important piece, I think, and that is, you know, if you're going to listen to a specific guru about a political problem or a specific guru about a personal problem or something, you even listen to your specific guru, right? So I think Rachel Maddow or Sean Hannity is my talking head that I respect. Or I think, you know, Jordan Peterson, or I think that, I don't know, insert other guru is the guy or gal I should be listening to. But Star Wars, to your point, is a shared story. It's a shared story that can cross whether you think Rachel Maddow or Sean Hannity is your guru, or whether you think, nobody is your guru. It doesn't really matter who you think your guru might be.
Mm-hmm.
You could still enjoy Star Wars and use that as a shared story in a very fractured or broken up media.
Yeah, no, the world is broken. It is cracked up, and people don't really know who to trust. And that's where your upbringing comes in. That's where your philosophy comes in. If you have principles and you believe in things, it doesn't matter whether or not Sean Hannity affirms your belief or the way that you view the world on any given night. It doesn't matter if Tucker Carlson changes his mind on a certain issue, because you have things in your life that are stable and through lines. For me, again, before I discovered libertarianism, before I knew anything about Ayn Rand or Hayek, I was a Qui-Gon Jinn and Yoda and Obi-Wan fan, and I watched these movies religiously. And as you can tell from my Yoda bust on my desk, it is something that is next level to me. I have this shirt on that I'm wearing right now. It says, your focus determines your reality. And it's my favorite Qui-Gon Jinn line from Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. And it's one of those things that once I started reading the Stoic philosophers, Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus, you start to see exactly where Star Wars got these ideas from, whether it's, Zen philosophy or the Stoics. Like the idea that what you put into your head is ultimately what's going to go out. The kind of news media that you consume is naturally going to be the way that you see the world.
Right.
If you spend all of your time on Twitter seeing people being awful to each other, you're going to think your reality is going to be that people are awful to each other.
Absolutely.
So
yes,
this is the kind of stuff that at a very early age, I was picking up from Star Wars as like a 12-year-old. And then it made sense years down the road in a much deeper way.
Well, the funny part is, right, I'm a tad older than you. And when I first saw Star Wars, I saw it in the movie theaters, right, as a kid. And when I watched it, I loved it, obviously, right? But when I saw the reboot, I guess, or the is it prequel, episode 1, whatever episode 1 is, right? That one. You reading your book made me rethink it, because I hated that movie.
Okay.
And I hated it because it wasn't my Star Wars back in my day, right? That's exactly why I did it, right? Back in my day, we didn't do that. I was literally the old man saying, get off my lawn, you punks. That was me, right? So I didn't like it at all. But you have somehow saved it, and this is crazy for people my age, and I think I'm insane by even saying this, but you made it to where you talked about the ideas of Padme and the concepts that are important of things like humility and swallowing your pride and things like that, which I just was like, this is not my Star Wars. And I think but you actually showed something that I didn't think about at all. And I realized it because, as you know, I ran for office this year and got my ass kicked. So when you get your ass kicked,
rigged system.
There we go. I could do that. That's one thing. I won, and it's a rig. That's option 1. Option 2 is accepting that and trying to swallow my pride and be humble and keep moving. And I think there was a lot of value in that aspect. You brought that up throughout many chapters, but I know you brought it up specifically in that one.
Yeah, in chapter 1, I wanted to address what I view as a societal hubris problem. And basically the fact that our media ecosystem, our social media ecosystems, have made it very, very easy for people to always believe that they are correct and to have their opinions and their insights affirmed, and to be surrounded by people who tell them exactly what they want to hear. Yes, men. And, we know that social media algorithms and censorship styles have basically made it so that we are seeing a whole lot of people who tell us yes and clap to everything that we say, because they think that that's what we want. They think that we don't want to talk to our uncle who we disagree with on Facebook, but we do. That's like our uncle. Yes. We love that person. But Facebook sort of makes assumptions, and then the culture moves. And so again, what I do is that I look at every bit of Star Wars in my life. I have favorites and least favorites, but I try to take it all seriously. I go, all right, this is my text. This is like my religious, these are my religious documents. You know, when new canon is added, I go, okay, all right, here are the new facts. And that's just how I have fun with Star Wars. And so episode 1, I saw it when I was 9, 10 years old. So it was good to me. I didn't mind Jar Jar as much. And that was kind of the big problem people had.
Right.
But growing older, what I saw in episode 1 was primarily this issue that I take on in chapter 1 of the book, which is how does Padme solve the crisis of her planet being invaded by the Trade Federation? And this always comes up with the trade routes and galactic regulation, stuff like that. But it's a little bit more layered than that.
No, I like it, but you bring up something else too, which is similar, which is the idea that we don't want to say, I don't know, right? That's, you know, I've got to be right no matter what. And if I yell louder, it's good. But I also look at leadership too, right? And in my own world, I'll bring my own world in. When I first started running for office in 2018, not so much 2022, in 2018, I had a lot of people who just thought, oh my God, Larry's going to make magic happen. And a lot of people who were afraid to tell me I was wrong. They thought, oh, we can't make Larry angry because he's going to do something great. So let's pacify him. Even if he's wrong, let's pacify him. And I actually had a problem with people who wouldn't tell me I was wrong. And so I had to be able to get people around me who would say, you know what, maybe you want to say, I don't know on this one. And that was actually challenging to find in a small pond, where in 2018, I was kind of I was the biggest guy running in 2018. If that makes any sense, right? Back then. The same wasn't true in 2022. But in 2018, it kind of was true. And I had to find people who wouldn't. People were surprised that I didn't want them to just go, yes, Larry. Yes, Larry.
Last night, I was reading Seneca's letter from a Stoic. So Seneca is basically he was the advisor to Emperor Nero in the Roman Empire. He was his Stoic advisor. He was basically the guy trying to keep him from doing all the evil things he was doing and always failing. Even in this time, in the days of the Roman Empire, this guy Seneca was writing in a letter to one of his friends about how there is this obnoxious guy in his neighborhood who has these house parties. And basically, he wants to appear smart to everybody who comes over to his dinner parties. And so he pays his slaves exorbitant amounts of money to read all of the great texts and then be able to whisper them into his ear. And so, like, he'll be at a dinner party and he'll be like, oh, well, you know, Epictetus would have said, wait, okay. Epictetus would have said this. And Seneca's writing in this letter and he's going, this guy just cannot stand to be at a table and not appear like he knows everything. He's mortified at just having to do the work himself or saying, I don't know. And when I think about how that applies directly to what we're talking about, when we debate people online, and you do this on Facebook all the time, how many times have you done it? You've been debating somebody on Facebook, you're in a thread, and then you go and you do a little research on the thing real quick, just to make sure that your response and what you drop into the thread is going to be very, very hard to refute. And you realize, like, people are dealing with one another in sort of bad faith, because you're not just arguing like with your brother on Facebook, you're arguing with your brother and against Wikipedia and whatever articles he's finding that you don't have any way to dispute because you don't have the knowledge. And so when I've started managing sort of my online relationships, I just started going, I don't know. I don't know. I think your perspective is really interesting. I want to know more about it, but I am not going to stealthily go Google the answer to this debate that we're having and then hit you with information that I found online. And no, I kind of took this, and if I could make the Star Wars analogy, the thing that I kind of found in episode 1 is how Padme solves the crisis of the invasion of Naboo. She tries the political route. She goes to Coruscant to get an intervention. Doesn't work. She also tries dealing with it through pure raw diplomacy. But the thing that it takes her doing is actually striking up a new relationship with the Gungans, the fish people on Naboo who hate her, and they also hate the human beings of Naboo. And you find out from Boss Nass and the Gungans that the reason they hate the Naboo is because they think they're snobby, and they think that the Naboo think that they're better than them. Basically, they view the Naboo as like urban elites who look down on them. And
Absolutely.
Padme solves this
We
problem.
in America have no idea what that's about.
No, yeah. And
Yes.
I really I can't tell you how many Star Wars fans I've talked to who I tell them about this and they go like, "Oh, I never really picked up on that." Because Boss
I'm telling
Nass
you, you saved episode 1. You
because Boss
saved that
Nass
movie. Yes.
he's talking to them in the jungle there, and he goes, "The Naboos, they think they're so smart. They think their brains so big," and he doesn't want to do anything to do with them. And that's when Padme steps forward in front of everybody, and she kneels before him, and she goes, "I'm begging you. We need your help. We have shared interests, and our societies are both great and equal." And then he laughs and he goes, "Wait. You don't think you're greater than the Gungans? I like this. We can be friends." And I was like, oh my God, political polarization has just been solved.
There we go. Star Wars has fixed it again. But this goes to your next piece you bring up, which I love. I don't know if I'm going to quote you right. You said empathy is a fundamental ingredient to democracy. Did I get that right?
I would say so. Yeah.
So I think with that piece, people don't think about empathy having any value. They conflate empathy with sympathy, right? They think sympathy, for those who don't really know the difference, and then people get mixed up all the time. Sympathy is when you feel sorry for someone who's had loss, which is normal and human, and you could and should often feel sorry for people who have lost. That's sympathy. Empathy is trying to understand the other person, trying your best to kind of put yourself in their shoes or kind of understand what they would think or why they would think something, maybe giving them good faith, any of those types of things. I think that's the empathy issue that we struggle with. And the example I'll often give is serial killers.
Yeah.
And you might go, serial killers? Yeah. If you watch TV or the movies and there's some serial killer on the loose and the cops can't find him, who do they bring in? They bring in a profiler, right? The profiler comes in and says, in the movie, of course, or the TV show, yes, he's a 45-year-old male who beat his kids. And, because of what he's thinking, he'll be on 45th and 6th Avenue at 10 o'clock tomorrow. Oh, great. And they'll get him and the episode's over, right? Well, in that case of the profiler, that person has empathy. They're putting themselves in the mind of the serial killer, but there's no sympathy there. They don't want the serial killer to, be okay and go back to work. They don't want that. They want the serial killer to go to jail forever or be killed, depending on the state. So you can have empathy and have sympathy, or have empathy and have no sympathy, or have empathy and have any other kind of feelings. And I feel we ignore empathy as a valuable, I guess, ingredient to society in general.
You generally want to be able to see yourself in the stories and experiences of others. One thing that you see a lot in pop culture is like prequel, and Star Wars did this, a prequel on a villain. How did Darth Vader become Darth Vader? And there was an element of sympathy to that story. Basically, they want you to feel bad for him, to feel, oh, pitiful, oh, he had no choice, da, 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 da. But the deeper thing and the more important thing is to be able to see what Anakin Skywalker went through. He was born a slave. He was raised a slave. He never had autonomy. He never had choices that he could make. And then his mother died prematurely. He thought that he could stop it from happening. Again, he wanted choice. He wanted to have a choice in what happens. Then his wife, he has visions of her dying. And then he's like, all right, I've never had control over anything in my life. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure this doesn't happen. And the deeper thing is for you to not just feel bad for him, but to go, I could see myself in this exact situation. I could see how I could come to this conclusion. I could see how I could join the empire. Because if things were just bad enough for me, if my background had been as yucky as this person, maybe I would also want order and societal top-down control, because maybe I just want stability. That's kind of what Star Wars has always been asking us to consider. And particularly a lot of Star Wars prequels and TV shows have tried to show us like how good people signed up for the empire. And the only way that you can understand that is through empathy, to go like, oh, I see myself in that person's story.
Well, you said it. You said it's used all the time. You talk about two different aspects. One is the concept of the mask, but I'll go one step further. You talk about the idea of, don't be a victim, be a stormtrooper, right? The idea that if you're in a bad spot, a terrible spot, we have the answer. Come join up the empire, be a stormtrooper. Don't be bullied, be the bully, right? Make order so that people can't be bullied. You're going to be the good guy here if you do this. And I think you see that in most militaries, right? When I was a kid joining the Marine Corps, right? I joined the Marine Corps when I was 17. Same idea. I'm going to join, right? And I'm going to be the good guys, right? And I think many people are angry at what our military is doing. But what I would ask you is, without question, do you think the individual Marine, soldier, or sailor thinks they're doing a bad thing? No. Even if they are, of course not, right? Even if they are the guy bombing somebody, they're not going, great, I can't wait to go kill children. They're joining thinking they're doing the right thing. And when I was a kid, 17, 18, 19, this is going to sound silly, but I say it often, life was easier for me. I joined during Ronald Reagan. That's when I was in the Marine Corps. And, life was easy, black and white. We were good. They were bad. And they was whoever Ronald Reagan told me they was. And that's it. And that's the they of the day, right? He says they're the they, they're the bad guys. It's fine. And it is clearer. But you also bring in something else, the idea of the mask, of taking away individuality. And in your book, you actually attack collectivism.
Yep.
And you bring the idea that the first step is the mask, right? Taking away individuality. And it brought me back again to my Marine Corps days. The first thing they do in the Marine Corps is they shave your head.
Yep.
Everyone gets a bald head.
The first thing the Antifa radical has to do is cover their face. And
yes.
It's not just about concealing their identity from the cops. And this was something it didn't occur to me until I was like halfway through this chapter, and I was writing about basically how stormtrooper helmets are important for erasing, the identity of whoever's underneath. You become the empire. You become strong when you're part of the group. And there's this scene in The Force Awakens where one of the stormtroopers takes off his helmet, and his commander goes, "Who gave you permission to take that helmet off? Because you are a different person when you're with the group. And then when you go to your personal quarters, that's where you can be you. You can be yourself." Right. But like the Antifa radical, the mask is not just about cops and avoiding being arrested. It's also about becoming part of the black bloc, because you've got all these scrawny baristas with bachelor's degrees who have billy clubs and pipes, and they are all a bunch of weakling turds. And when they when they go out into the streets to get into street fights and political violence, look, they are not intimidating. They're not scary people. But if you dress the right way, you can be.
And there's a bunch of you.
And there's a bunch of you. And you're not just this group of like disjointed individuals. That's why it's called Black Bloc. They move together and they do it as a group. And as a group, they're scary. And when you think about that and just how that erases the individuals, that's part of their ideology on its own. The Empire does it. We do it, in some sense, like all of us have ways of putting on masks in casual ways. And I'm not talking about COVID masks, but like even just our social media personas, our avatars.
Sure.
Who I am on Twitter versus who I am talking to you right now. Which one's the mask?
Right. Right. I remember, though, in the Marine Corps, again, we used the word individual as an insult. So people would be doing something and one guy's not doing it, and we would go, "Oh, there's the individual. You want to be an individual now?" That was an insult. Like that's the worst thing you could be, right? And now as a libertarian, I'm like, that's like the best thing you could be. But that was the worst thing you could be. And people were ashamed. Marines were ashamed when they were called an individual. That was like no, I'm not an individual. Like they didn't want to do it. And I see the value in that, in creating the black bloc, right? Or creating the unit that will do as it's told. It makes sense to me. But if you do that to do that, though, you want to have an actual enemy. And this goes to the next thing that you bring up. The idea, you link the word, maybe I'm going to be it wrong, the phrase rebel scum to Hotel Rwanda. Now, I would have never made that link, but you did. And you did in a way that said, calling people that name, scum in this case, is the dehumanizer, right? The same as in Rwanda, how they call the other guys the cockroaches.
Yep.
And I remember this. I actually teach this, believe it or not. It's going to be weird. My day job, when I used to work, when the New York State let me work, is I do a lot of training. And one of the things I do is emotional intelligence, stuff like that, empathetic training, empathetic communication. One of the things I bring up is the idea of the one-word story, which is a common thing people use. Oh, I can't talk to him. He's mean. She's stupid. He's nasty. She's bad. Whatever. It's the one-word story that describes everybody about that person. That the entire individual, that person is now one word.
Mm-hmm.
And I bring it up because in every war the U.S. has fought, they always have a one-word enemy, right? When I was in, it was Ivan because we were fighting the Soviets. It was Ivan. Now it's Haji. During the Vietnam War, it was Charlie, right? During World War II, it was the Kraut, right? Yep. It was there's a one word for everyone, right? And they do it in return, right? The Germans fighting the Russians in World War II, right? They had one word for them too, right? They called them, forgot what they called them. They had a word for them. Was it Ivan? I forgot. Whatever. They had a word for them too. There's always a one-word story for the bad guy, so we can dehumanize them.
And so I grew up Republican before I found libertarianism. I grew up Republican, and I suppose
fine.
Yeah, I suppose libertarians deal with this as well. But I'll give you a one-word thing that they've always called us: Nazi. You're a Nazi just because you have any sort of different opinion than we might have on anything.
Yes.
And the thing that I ended up digging into in the book here is like an extension of the Hotel Rwanda kind of cockroach attitude, the rebel scum attitude. Do you remember the Jeopardy contestant Arthur Chu, who went far left off the rails?
No, I don't remember.
So this guy won 7 consecutive rounds of Jeopardy a couple of years ago, named Arthur Chu. And then January 6th happens. And there was the incident of Ashley Babbitt, one of the rioters, getting shot and killed. And Arthur Chu takes to Twitter the next day, and he starts talking about how she was a Nazi, doesn't present evidence, and this has actually been shown not to be true. All the research has been done. Not a Nazi. She's just a QAnon. Right. She was just a QAnon person. And he says this about Ashley Babbitt's death: when a bullet goes through the fatty tumor a Nazi has in the space where a human being would have a brain, nothing has been lost. And he threads and goes on and on and on with these really awful stuff about how we have a moral obligation to kill these people without proving that this person is what he says he is, or what he says she is. And it just made me think, because I've been called a Nazi more times than I can count, just because I believe in low taxes and individual freedom and vax mandates being overreach. When you're on the right, you kind of just have to deal with those things. There's a really interesting discourse going on right now with Nate Hotchman at the National Review, where he's been asking liberal writers to write open letters to him, basically explaining, how is conservatism different than fascism in your moral universe? Show me how they're different, because you're always conflating them. So kind of the point is if you can call somebody this thing, it gives you license to do whatever you need to do to them. And it's really, really, really bad.
Yes. So I want to go back to the mask again. Now I'm bouncing around a little bit, but it's all in the same world.
Mm-hmm.
The mask piece you bring up is the idea that taking off the mask, as you said, is a way of almost being vulnerable, trying to show the real person, and that we don't often want to do that. I found that there's an author, he's a friend of mine too, an author, guy by the name of Mark Goulston. I don't know if you happen to know of him. He wrote many books. One of the books he wrote was Talking to Stupid.
No,
another one was Just Listen. Brilliant author. Used to be a hostage negotiator in Los Angeles. PhD, brilliant guy. Love his books. Great guy. Had him on my show once. Wonderful. But one of the things he talks about is the idea that in business, when you're a leader, bare your throat. That's what he says, which is take off your mask. Right? He says, bare your throat. He goes, because if you do that, you bare your throat, what's going to happen is the people who care about you are going to try to protect you. They're going to come out. You're going to get everybody out. Whoa. Don't attack him. His throat's out. The people want to get you, go, oh, his throat's out. And they go get you. And the people who don't care go, whatever. And they go on their phones. So you actually get to see what's happening by baring your throat. you're showing who you are. And then once you bare your throat, and if you can survive the attacks of a throat that's been, bared, then you're stronger, right? Then you're actually stronger if you can survive it, because now people trust you, they believe you more, that kind of thing. And I feel like that's an aspect that most people don't think. They think you can never be vulnerable. You can never show humanity.
This is why in Star Wars, the Darksiders, basically the Sith, and then Kylo Ren wasn't really a technical Sith, but he was kind of like a Sith cultist. He was like a believer in the ideas. This is why Darksiders have this tradition of killing their old self and taking on a new name. Darth Vader was Anakin Skywalker. And if you ask Darth Vader, I believe you to be Anakin Skywalker, my father. That's what Luke Skywalker says to him. And he says, no, that name no longer has any meaning to me. Anakin Skywalker is dead. That's what Darth Vader always says. And then Kylo Ren, the same thing. Kylo Ren is not his name. His name is Ben Solo. And when Han says, my son is alive, he says, no, your son is gone. He was weak and I destroyed him. Kylo Ren is what remains. And I was talking about this idea to a friend of mine who works in a group named Urban Ministries. And they do outreach to gang members to get them out of the life while they are in prison. The idea is to get them not killed in prison, so that then when they get out of prison, they can leave the life. And so Urban Specialists, that's their name, they would basically work with these guys behind bars to try to get them to take off that gang persona and like, actually, who are you really? And do you want a different life? But so many of these kids, these young people usually, they took on the gang identity as a means of survival in their tough neighborhoods or in their families. They did it for status. Their old self was weak, but when they were in the gang, they were suddenly dangerous and people respected them. And a lot of them don't remember who they used to be. They think that after the killings that they've done, the violence that they've committed, this is who I am now.
Yeah. And how do you go back?
Yeah. And that's what you see so many times with the Darksiders in Star Wars. It's them at war with this idea of their vulnerability and the weakness of their old self. They went to the dark side so they could feel strong.
Have you ever seen the Amazon Prime series, The Man in the High Castle?
I watched season 1. I dropped off. Yeah.
There's 2 parts I think that are I think impressive about the main character, John Smith. For those of you who haven't watched the show, it is a alternate universe where the Germans win World War II, and half of America goes to the Germans, other half goes to the Japanese, and the eastern part of America becomes basically a Nazi state. So in this case, he's a soldier. He's a soldier in the American army when the Germans take over. And the Germans give him a choice. They give him literally a Nazi armband. And they say, okay, if you join the Nazis and you become part of the German, Reich, then all's forgiven. No punishment. You retain your officer status. You will just be an officer now in the German army. Done. And if not, there's a camp over there for you. The guy has a pregnant wife, and he's like, I'll take the armband. And he becomes a Nazi. And at first you have some sympathy for him. But then over the course of time, he becomes a hardcore Nazi. Like over the course of time, he's a real hardcore Nazi. Then at the end, I don't want to give the whole thing away, there's a part of it where he becomes very powerful. And his wife's like, stop this. Stop. This is not who you are. Stop this. Yeah. And he looks at her and he says, I don't know how. And he continues doing horrible things. He just keeps going. And I just thought that part of that series was kind of what you were saying. A guy who was trying to fight for democracy in America. He was an officer in the American army. And he's put in a situation to where my family goes into camp or I become a Nazi.
Once you start down the dark path, forever will it consume your destiny.
There we go.
Now, yes. This is just very, very basic stuff. We are the sum of our actions. You can't just do evil casually. Evil begets evil. It begins to rationalize itself, and down into the hole you go. Now Yoda is technically wrong when he says, forever will it consume your destiny. he's right that it puts you on that path. But then the other Star Wars struggle is always, can there be redemption? Can you leave? Can you take that mask off and be Anakin Skywalker again, even if just for a moment on your deathbed? I really loved diving into this in sort of a deep socio-political way. As a Star Wars fan, it was kind of my dream to do that.
Sure. But you go to the next piece, which is the idea of redemption, right? Can there be redemption for a Nazi, right? Can there be redemption for a gangbanger who's committed murder? Can there be redemption for someone who said horrible things to people that might have caused them to be broken?
I'll give you a Nazi and a gangbanger. The guy from American History X. Did you ever see that movie?
I did. Ed Norton.
That's one of the most powerful redemption movies that there is. Nazi gang member, and Edward Norton goes to prison after doing murders. Really brutal stuff. And I mean, long story short, I don't really believe in spoilers for a movie that is this old. But he does turn the page and he goes toward the light and walks away from the white supremacists. But there's sort of a belief about redemption throughout different cultures. There's one belief, and it's particularly the pre-Christian sort of Judaism belief about redemption, is that it's almost like a debt that gets paid. There's there's sort of like karmic levels of debt that has to be paid. You put this much evil into the world, you're going to have to put this much good in, quite literally, to balance those scales, and you have to pay a debt. And the idea of Christ was always that the redemptive element is like out of your hands. You have so much sin on your plate that there is nothing that you can do to pay it. You simply have to accept the blood of Christ to pay it for you. And in American History X, the only thing that can really cosmically balance the scales for Edward Norton is his younger brother gets murdered. His younger brother gets murdered in a retribution act of violence against one of Edward Norton's murders. So someone gets retribution on the younger brother. And cosmically, there is a redemptive, blood for blood, you put this into the world. What made you think you weren't going to get it back in return? And there's that version of redemption. And then there's also just the personal element of redemption, people trying to find the light in themselves and go on the journey to fix things.
Absolutely. And I think, you go right back to the idea in America, which is, I think maybe we were, but I feel like we were more of a country of redemption, second chances. I feel like as we become more of a mature country, that's gone away. We're now much more of a punishment-based country legally. And even now with our cancel culture, right? Once you make an error, you keep that error forever. I feel like we've gone from what I would call a guilt society to a shame society, right? And a guilt society is, I did something wrong, I must accept my guilt and then try to repent in some way, right? That's generally speaking a more Western way of thinking. A more Eastern way of thinking is much more of a shame culture. Once you do a bad thing, there's a stain on my soul, stain on my family.
A stain on your family and your honor.
Yes. So I have to commit suicide, and then that ends the shame, right? Once I end my life, I end the shame, and suicide becomes the way of wiping away the shame because I don't exist and the shame goes with me. So I think there's some of that in there too. But you bring up a different piece though, which is the idea of, what do you call them? Force ghosts. Is that right?
Yeah, the Force ghosts. Yoda, Luke, everybody becomes a Force ghost.
You become a Force ghost, not because you are dealing with, you're a good guy or a bad guy, but because you fought the inner battle. That redemption is not a battle with the outside world or a battle with the people who you've wronged, but redemption is a battle internally. So if I win the battle internally, then I've created inner peace. And if I have inner peace, I get to be a Force ghost. Did I get that right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so this is, again, something I had to learn by doing the research. I wanted to understand how Star Wars might have some advice on cancel culture. And it turns out it very much does. But it's one of these things, right? So there's redemption. There's your quest to try to right wrongs. But is your quest to right wrongs dependent on someone saying, I forgive you?
Mm.
If someone is unwilling to say, I forgive you, does that mean that you cannot reclaim the light or get back on the right path? Of course, that's not the case, right? Like, you have to be okay going through your life, letting people carry their hurt and have their own journey towards forgiveness of wrongs that you've done. Redemption's not about getting the okay from the people that you've hurt. It's about what goes on in you. In Star Wars, it's in the Western world, we live in the Judeo-Christian world. The idea about force ghosts, Yoda dies and becomes a ghost in the afterlife, Obi-Wan lives on eternally after death. We sort of internalize it in a Christ-like narrative, sort of that this person gets eternal life, that they were like the epitome of good, therefore they overcome death like Christ did. And that's completely natural and understandable. And then Vader dies at the end of Return of the Jedi. And then he shows up at the very end of Return of the Jedi at the Ewok party on Endor. And it really creates a wrinkle where you go, all right, in the Christian faith, if the person on their deathbed accepts Christ, they're going to heaven.
Right,
and
right.
so that's kind of how like we think about it. We go, all right, well, Vader, I guess, gets to live eternally and be a force ghost. But in Star Wars, that's not actually what has happened, because there would be a lot of force ghosts if that was
right. Yes.
The people who get to be force ghosts are a very, very small class of force users who have experienced the entire spectrum of self-awareness and conquering of their
Oh,
light
got it.
and dark with the force. And here's a remarkable thing. The first person to ever achieve the force ghosting capability was Qui-Gon Jinn after episode 1. Nobody had ever done it before, like in thousands of years of Jedi lore. When Yoda,
I thought it was that Darth. Was the Darth? Not Darth Sidious. Was it Darth? Wasn't it the Darth? I thought it was a dark side guy who had said conquered death.
Oh, Darth Plagueis. Yeah.
Darth Plagueis. Thank you. There we go.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I thought it was Darth Plagueis who did it.
There was like a myth told, by Palpatine about a Darth Plagueis the Wise who overcame death, but we don't know if that meant that he just like lived like physically, like as a physical being.
Got it.
Forever,
okay.
Or if that was something spiritual. But
sorry, chat. We geeked out for a second. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Yeah. When
yes.
Qui-Gon dies, he becomes one with the Force, as a disembodied voice. Yoda starts hearing from him during the Clone Wars, episode 2 and 3. And Yoda literally thought he was insane. He told the Jedi Council, I'm hearing Qui-Gon talk to me. And they had him like committed. They got him like medical service because they were like, no, life after death doesn't exist. And you would think that Jedi would believe in it, but they actually didn't up until the time of the movies. The people who ascend to that level, they conquered their inner darkness. Yoda goes on this journey where he has to like face his Jungian dark shadow. I don't know. I'm trying to think of like a good story like Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde or something like that, where you have to.
No, but I get what your point is. You've got to be able to go through the dark and the light and then come out at the end, basically. Yeah. And understand yourself.
Interesting people have been all over life and been in the light and been in the dark. And they stay on the right path, or they eventually go in the right direction. And it's really a hubris thing. And so what I tried to tie this chapter to was that the solution to cancel culture is not some sort of new societal bargain on redemption and forgiveness. That would be really great if people became forgiving. The better thing that we need to go for generally is just everybody being able to look in the mirror and realize I am flawed. I am messed up. My life is not my Instagram self. And if I want to get the good end of the bargain when I mess up, I need to give people fairness and kindness when they mess up. It's purely a look in the mirror sort of thing.
So let me go down to that piece, right? When people are trying to cancel or do those things, very often their intentions are good, right? They're trying to save the world or save stuff. But as to your point, the dark side loves your good intentions, right? So good intentions don't mean it ends well, right? In fact, good intentions are often because of fear, because another piece you bring up is the idea of fear. that fear is really an enemy. And I say it all the time. All the things that we hate in America all came because of afraid Americans. The war on drugs, afraid Americans. The war on terror, afraid Americans. The
Fear
military
leads to anger. Anger leads to hate, and hate leads to suffering.
100%.
Boom.
Yes. Yes. So Yoda was right.
And could I say something just to add on there? One of your
Please.
commenters on Facebook, Tathian, he asked, didn't some Sith in the cartoons meet Yoda? It's like Sith ghosts. The answer to that question is that the Sith have tapped into life after death, but in the sense of like a poltergeist, Sith haunt places, and their spirits are confined to those places. So Yoda does encounter some dark side ghosts, but that dark side ghost is like damned and can never leave that tomb that he is in. Whereas these sort of people who actually become Force ghosts, they can go wherever they want and move freely and all that kind of stuff. So a little bit of a difference.
So then let's walk down some of the chat if we could. Richard says Star Trek is better than Star Wars. Fight me. The whole point's not to fight you, Richard. That's the entire point we're trying to make. We don't want to be fighting. You're doing the wrong thing. But I do happen to love classic Star Trek. I do love
Richard. Richard sounds like a cockroach to me. I think that we should probably declare war. So
that's what it is. We should fight him. He's right. Let's fight. So yes, no. But it's funny. I do like Star Trek, but there's a difference, and most people don't see this. And this will make some Star Wars people unhappy. Star Wars isn't science fiction. Star Trek is.
Yeah.
Star Wars is fantasy. Star Wars is the same as like Lord of the Rings, right? It's a fantasy. If you want to try to put science into Star Wars, don't bother watching Star Wars. Don't do it. It's a fantasy. You just accept it. It's the Force. It's a thing. Stop thinking about it, right? And the lightsaber, they just work. And you fly in space like an airplane. Just be quiet. Shh, that's how it works, right? You just accept these things as true. It's a fantasy. And I think that's the issue. It really isn't science fiction. So, I mean, every planet in the Star Wars world has the same gravity, right? I mean, there's no science. It's just fantasy. So just accept it as fantasy. That's it. So yes. Let me see if I can go down here a couple more. There's a bunch of little poppy positive things. Thank you guys for all the positive comments. I appreciate it. Sam says, academia and the publishing apparatus is corrupt. As a statistician, it drove me nuts looking at the method sections. No way you tear it apart in real time. Politicians take advantage of this. I'm not sure what that's for. I'm sorry. This may not be for us. Sam might have been attacking. I don't know.
I'm not sure what that's for. The academia and publishing apparatus is corrupt.
That's true. He's not wrong.
It's very true.
He's not wrong. So yes. Richard goes on to say, I agree. Jar Jar was the perfect sidekick / comic relief. You are winning this episode 1 thing. I guess I'm wrong. And also provided a philosophical consideration which would not have otherwise been present, not to mention necessary plot device. Well, there we go.
Yeah, a little bit. If you can't tolerate a bumbling buffoon on your movie screen, you're going to have a hard time doing it in real life. I try not to be too judgy about this because, like, again, there's a generation of people who were kids when episode 1 came out. And so a really goofy character like Jar Jar just went over a lot of people's heads, mine included.
Yeah.
But I totally get why it annoyed the crap out of older people. I think it's just really, really incumbent on Star Wars fans, particularly older ones, to always be watching Star Wars with the eyes of a child. And if you are not able to do that, the problem is you, not the Star Wars.
There we go. Yes.
There is adult Star Wars stuff out there, like the new Andor show and bits of The Mandalorian, but you've got to always be able to look at this through the next generation's eyes.
Absolutely. Dave says, Darth Vader wants you for today's Galactic Empire. See your local recruiter today. Sign-on bonuses available for qualified entrants. Look at that. Yep. So that's it. We're ready to go. Ready to go. I love that. So people are enjoying this for sure. Good. Andrew goes in a quote, it's how liberty dies, with thunderous applause.
Best line from episode 3. Padme's big hook, line, and sinker. George Lucas was really adamant that he wanted to tell a story about not just like Napoleon's empire, the Roman Republic falling to empire, but like these things are done by popular mandate. Democracy is not conquered, it is given away. Liberty dies with thunderous applause.
I say that all the time.
Please protect us. Thank you.
Yes. I say all the time, it's very rare. It does happen sometimes, but it's rare that the American government just takes away rights. It happens, but it's rare. Most of the time, we eagerly vote them away. Right?
Yeah.
We eagerly vote our rights away. Sometimes we just take them, but usually we eagerly vote them away. I remember,
and to your first commenter, the academia and the media establishment are very eager to give it away, and there are
100%.
societal elites. So
I remember the thing that drove me crazy in New York, that people were mad at me for even saying it. When I live in New York City, right? It's where I live. And during the lockdowns, they lock us all down. And at 7 o'clock at night, everybody would go on their balcony or on the window and clap. And they'd all clap. And they'd all clap for the essential workers who were still working. And I thought to myself, all these essential workers are all government employees.
mm-hmm.
So you're literally clapping for your jailer. That is next level Stockholm syndrome. Like en masse, we all got out and we're like, yay, thank you for locking us in our homes and we can't go to work anymore. And we did it for weeks. It was insane.
Larry, one thing I wanted to add, because it's how liberty dies with thunderous applause, is kind of one of those really great pro-liberty, liberal democracy lines from Star Wars. And I love it. It's definitely a libertarian attitude that I think libertarians understand better than Republicans and Democrats, who both fall right into that kind of thinking. There's a line from the new Andor series on Disney Plus. There's a character in the show named Nemec, and he's writing a manifesto against the Empire. And I wanted to read what he wrote.
Please,
because it's really beautiful. It's probably like going to take me 1 minute, but it's a really beautiful passage about freedom and standing up against the Empire. And I just want to share it with you. So the character writes in his manifesto against the Empire, "There will be times when the struggle seems impossible. I know this already. Alone, unsure, dwarfed by the scale of the enemy. Remember this: freedom is a pure idea. It occurs spontaneously and without instruction. Random acts of insurrection are already occurring constantly throughout the galaxy. There are whole armies, battalions that have no idea that they've already enlisted in the cause. Remember that the frontier of rebellion is everywhere, and even the smallest act of insurrection pushes our lines forward. And remember this: the imperial need for control is so desperate because it is so unnatural. Tyranny requires constant effort. It breaks, it leaks, it's brittle. Oppression is the mask of fear. And remember that. And know this: the day will come when all of these skirmishes and battles, these moments of defiance, will have flooded the banks of the Empire's authority, and there will be one too many. One single thing will break the siege." That is just the most true thing Star Wars has ever said about freedom and tyranny.
Yes.
That it takes constant effort to oppress people.
I feel there's a deeper piece to that, what you talk about in your book also, which is what he's saying is, don't worry, there's hope.
Mm-hmm.
And hope is the critical piece, right? People always tell me, well, Larry, when are things going to get so bad to where we actually rebel and change things? I say never. That isn't the issue. People will stay in negative situations their entire life. It's called learned helplessness. They'll do it constantly. Things have to be bad and they have to have hope.
Yep.
Those two things together. If it's just bad with no hope, we just suffer as humans. We don't make a move. But what was the line? Hope is what rebellion is built on.
Rebellions are built on hope.
There we go. Yes. So once there's things are bad, and now there's hope. And the bad example I give is Russia in 1917. Mm-hmm. Right? For 300 years, Russians were underneath the Romanov family, and they were in a disaster, terrible, horribleness. And very rarely, there were some small rebellions here or there, but hardly anything. But then here comes Lenin. I got this thing called communism. You guys are going to love it.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh, this is hopeful. It's got to be better than this. I mean, it wasn't, but they thought it was going to be better than this, right? It's how bad can it be? It's got to be better than this thing we got now. And that gave them hope. And boom, you got a massive rebellion, right?
Anger and discontent is enough to break windows and burn down a Starbucks.
Correct.
But hope is what you build movements off of. You have to be building a certain thing. You have to be shooting for the future. Star Wars Rogue One, and this is what chapter 4 of How the Force Can Fix the World really digs into. Star Wars Rogue One is fascinating because it gives us finally a look inside a fractured rebellion. We learn that Mon Mothma, the lady in white robes, and Princess Leia represent one faction. They're kind of the neoliberal institutionalist faction.
Yes.
And then there's a radical faction led by Forrest Whitaker's Saw Gerrera. And they're like Antifa in space. They know the empire's bad. They think it's fascist. They know it's fascist because it is. And they are willing to do anything to hurt them, kill them, bomb them. And they don't really much care what gets hurt in the process.
Right.
They're not building anything. They're just hashtag resisting. And the heroes have kind of a choice in the movie about like which kind of side they really identify with. And the audience does too. The audience has a choice. Like, do I kind of identify with this Saw Gerrera guy who is, you know, very clear-eyed about the evil of the Empire? Or do I believe more in Leia and Mon Mothma, who are kind of painting a vision of the future that sounds nice, but that we have to move slow towards? People don't like being told to move slow when they are morally when they feel morally righteous.
Absolutely.
You know, moral certainty that you're correct.
But the righteous anger, as you mentioned, I mean, it does burn out, right? It gets big and then it burns out. It's definitely a big issue. Guys, I want to ask my audience here, if you guys are watching or listening and you like it, do me a favor, click the like button. I know I bug you about it, but click the like button. It does matter. It's how I get past the algorithms. It's how I get past the shadow banning. Do that. But I'm going to ask you for something specific, though, this time. The specific thing I'm going to ask you for is, would you do me a favor and subscribe to my Sharp Way YouTube page? I know that I got more than one YouTube page. I know. Don't complain. I know. But just this one. Go to the Sharp Way YouTube page. Click that, subscribe, and also click the bell so that you are able to get notifications when I go live. Remember, in January, I'm shifting a lot of my stuff only to the Sharp Way stuff. So it won't be on 8,000 things. It'll be moving towards the Sharp Way stuff. So please do that to the best of your ability. It really does matter. And the other piece I want to bring up here, as you know, I have a sponsor, theadvocates.org. Please do me a favor, head over there, take the world's smallest political quiz, or take one of the surveys, right? There's the identity politics and political correctness survey. The glory of these surveys, the glory of all these things, they're short. The longest surveys take maybe 5-6 minutes, and the test takes like 2 minutes. That's it. You can then share it, and once you share it, people will see it, and you'll start having conversations. And we won't fight, we'll talk. This is a great conversation starter for people around you. Share it, and it's free, and it makes my sponsors happy. So if you love me, and I know you do, or you wouldn't be watching, do this for free. Take one of these surveys and share it. It does matter, but do something else. Steven's good. He's given us so much of his time. He's talking about cool stuff. Follow him too. Check out what he's doing, StephenDKent.com, and follow him on Twitter at Stephen_Kent89. So I know I yapped a lot about those things, but I want to go to the other thing, if I could. Failure, right? Failure goes to redemption, right? They're both kind of, they're there. And we're in a world now where once you fail, you have to say that you didn't fail or never apologize. And I feel like failure is such, what's the quote by Yoda?
Failure, the greatest teacher is.
There we go. Yes, thank you. Failure, the greatest teacher is. Yes. And man, is that true, right? And I think we've almost lost that. As soon as somebody fails, it's, oh, you failed, you lost, so you're obviously bad.
Yeah.
It's crazy. I mean, isn't this a serious flaw in our culture in general? Am I wrong with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think to a certain extent, again, I mentioned kind of like the way that we filter our lives through Instagram filters, and we show people kind of the best things that we're up to, like on LinkedIn or whatever. We're constantly sharing our great successes, our job changes, the next great thing that we've done, a wonderful picture we took. We don't really put out the bad picture of us, or we don't put out, a lot of content about the kind of stuff that we've screwed up. But I will kind of point to one thing that's just on my mind right now, and Donald Trump. We know the left has problems, so I think that doesn't need to be said. But the moment that I knew that I was never going to be able to vote for Donald Trump was in the campaign season in 2015, 2016. He gave an interview to CBS where he was asked like if he had anything that he had ever asked for forgiveness for. This was when he was trying to be like, I am a Christian, I'm a leader of the evangelicals. And he was doing a string of interviews on that. And they're like, oh, okay, what's something you've asked for forgiveness for? And he went, nothing. never. And I was just like, oh my God, this is not going to work
Yes.
for me. This
Right,
is not
right,
my
right.
guy. But you've seen it, like it's now become really, really normal in our politics to double down. Now
Yes.
there was always a PR strategy for doubling down, but it has gotten to the point where it is the smartest thing to do. Do not say
No.
sorry. Do not say you messed up. Just call your supporters to your side and say, I stand by exactly what I did, and here's 1,000 people who will applaud me. That
Right.
is almost a better strategy PR wise now than
I
saying
know.
sorry. And that's a
Yes.
tragedy. That's not good.
I agree completely. Gene says, I like Star Trek and Star Wars. Yes, you can do that. I'm actually okay with that. Yes. I love that completely. But there's another piece that you bring up here, which is, if I remember right, it's the idea of not, hold on to get it right, not destroying what we hate, not fighting what we hate, but saving what we love. Am I
Yeah.
messing that up?
No, you got it. Yeah, no, that's from The Last Jedi. Again, controversial Star Wars movie, and I have strong opinions about it, but I do try to like just enjoy and learn as much as I can from every movie. But there's this one character named Rose Tico in the movie, and she has this great line about the bad guys, the First Order that they're fighting to
Mhm.
defeat, and she's having a romantic moment with one of the other characters, and she's looking at him. She goes, you know, this is how we're going to win, not by fighting what we hate, because that's easy. That's very easy to
Mhm.
do. It's by saving what we love. It could be our culture. It could be our friendships. It could be our children, our loved ones. If you wake up every day as a concerned parent about far left trans ideology in schools, and you are motivated by your hatred of the purple haired, tattooed teacher at your school where your
Mhm.
kid goes, if you're motivated by your disdain for her rather than your sincere, deep, and abiding love for your child,
Mm.
it's not going to be the right rebellion.
Right.
It's not going to be the right way spiritually for you to deal with that. It's not going to be good for your kid. It's going to look bad to people. Like there's so much better ways to fight our battles, and it's by preserving the things that we love about the world and our relationships. I know
Absolutely.
that's lovey dovey, that's soft stuff, but like I
I
believe
agree.
I believe that that's true. Um,
I the idea of that Gandhi says, "An eye for an eye, and we all go blind." Right? I don't want to be blinding everybody. Right? I'd rather us be trying to make things right to the best of our ability, fight less. Right? And look, we've been fighting Nazis literally for 80 years now. Right? 80 years
yep.
we've been fighting Nazis. They're still Nazis. Right? They're not gone. They're still Nazis.
Yeah.
We dropped more bombs on Nazis than anybody else in the world, right? For a long, and they're still Nazis, right? They haven't gone away. So yeah, I think we have a better chance of trying to turn people and love people and show them they can't win, or better, show them there's a better way of winning, right? To where they
The
won't take
sharp
over.
way.
The
Yeah.
sharp way is the only way. That's what I've been saying for years. People don't listen to me. God, maybe I should write a book about like Star Wars or something. Maybe I'll do that. That might be the way for me to win this damn thing. So yes, the last piece I want to bring up here. I know I've been keeping you for a while. I apologize. But the last piece I want to bring up here is the idea of fate versus choice, right? And the part of me that has bothered me about Star Wars, this is a pet peeve of mine. I know some people don't care, but for me, it's a pet peeve, is the idea of bloodline.
Hmm.
How bloodline is so critical to everything in Star Wars when it shouldn't just be bloodline. I mean, bloodline could matter. I'm not saying it
Yeah.
shouldn't matter, but it's so important, and that's the big thing. Is that bloodline is the big thing. You talk about the idea of free will a lot, but I think that Star Wars does two things. Star Wars, in my view, Star Wars contradicts itself. It says there's free will, and then there's not. And it's free will, but it's your fate. It's free
Hmm.
will, but it's your destiny. I don't know. Where do you go on that piece?
Yeah. So there's a lot, and your comment section is kind of touching on bits of it. So bloodline importance was really introduced, I guess, by context in the very original movies. When we learned that like Luke Skywalker is a hope for the galaxy and very powerful, because he had a very powerful father. So that was kind of
Right.
like in the subtext there. But then when
Right.
you get to episode 1, they introduce midichlorians. So the force is kind of like detectable in your blood. You can do a blood test and you could see how strong Anakin Skywalker was based on the blood cells. And that upset a lot of people. It removed,
I hated it.
yeah, well, it removed
I was like,
pure
let it be
spirituality.
magic. I want it to be
Yeah.
magic. Don't give me science. Let it be just magic force stuff. I did
Yeah.
not want science in the force at all.
And it definitely set a lot of people off in a bad way. But I am going to argue that they shouldn't be upset, because the truth of midichlorians is that the force is in all living things. It is in me. It is in the trees. It's in the birds, and it is variating in strength in every single thing. You can detect what the force is. You can feel it in someone's blood cells. Everybody has it. Luke has a line in one of the books where he's describing this to somebody, one of his Jedi pupils, after Return of the Jedi. And he goes, you know, he's so much stronger than me. And it's so easy for him. My classmate can lift rocks, no problem, but I have had to try so damn hard to do any of this. And Luke says, the force is like a door. For some people, it is already open. For others, it can be kicked open. For some people, that door is easy, and some people it will be hard. But every single person, he says, has the potential to do this thing. You might just have to work harder. And I mean, isn't that's life? That's so true. And for me, it kind of helped rehab the midichlorians thing a little bit. The door was wide open for Anakin Skywalker. He had force. Right. He had force privilege. It was easy for him. Right. It was easy for him.
Check your privilege, Anakin.
But anybody could do it. But there might be some blockages in you up here in your heart that you need to work out with the world for that door to be open. Now, going further, if I may, episode 8 and 9 introduced some big problems with the bloodline. So 8 really argued, in essence, that the world should kind of not be tied to this Skywalker legacy problem. They made the girl Rey from nowhere. She didn't know her parents. Her parents were insignificant. So all of the speculation that she was a Kenobi or that she was a Skywalker, they chucked it out. I, as a libertarian, actually really liked that because it sort of took the monarchism out of it.
Right, exactly.
There were some really good articles about this where they're like, The Last Jedi democratized the Force and reminded us that you didn't have to come from the great families to be the hero of the story. I'm for that. That's cool. And then at the very end, there's Broom Boy, right? There's the kid who like plays with Luke Skywalker toys, and then he pulls the broom to him with the Force in a very small exercise of the Force. And so that was a message. That was a narrative. Then comes episode 9. They changed directors. Lucasfilm is in complete disarray and chaos, as always, apparently. And then episode 9 undercuts it completely. They go in a different direction, and Rey becomes a Palpatine.
Yes.
Literally the worst possible plot twist of all time.
Yeah.
Really, really horrible. And so they immediately reintroduce this idea that the main characters are just children of the main characters and screw everybody else.
Yes. I was not a fan of 9.
Yeah.
I was not a fan. 1 used to be the one I hated the most. Now I think 9 I hate the most.
Mine used to be 2, Attack of the Clones, and now it is 9.
There we go.
Rise of the Skywalker is the bottom of the barrel.
It is now. Yes, I hated that one. Yes, well, not hated. I still watched it. So yeah, but yes, that's the worst one. Absolutely. So yes. So Stephen, I want to say, is there anything we missed? Something we should be talking about that I should have talked about that I didn't?
Larry, I've done a lot of book interviews, and I think you probably are familiar with this in our world. Like most people have never read the book, and they don't know any of the questions of which they're asking. You actually took us on a really nice tour through this book from front to back, and no, there's nothing else. Thank you.
There we go. Good. There we go. Yes, I know. People are funny. They say, Larry, how do you do good interviews, right? And I say, I don't research. It isn't that hard. It's research. You could just read the guy's book, and then talk about it. You could just do that. It's not that
No,
crazy.
thank you. I appreciate it so much. I think the only thing I want to say just to close out is probably the most important part of this book, after you get all the way through it, is the epilogue, what comes after it.
Hmm.
The epilogue, I
Yes.
started reflecting on the Last Jedi controversy and the
Yep.
fan divisiveness over that movie. And the
I did
main,
think that was interesting.
yeah,
In the audiobook, you actually did an episode after, like a podcast in the audiobook.
yes,
That I didn't finish, but
yeah.
I did listen to the entire epilogue. That I did.
The epilogue, I find it to be a really good closing point by nature, because it
Mhm.
was me sort of questioning the premise of the book. Like,
Right.
as a Star Wars fan, as a political person, I was like, this is ridiculous. The Force cannot fix the world. Da, 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 da.
Right.
Like, how did I ever think that this was a premise that works? But then I realized something about Star Wars fandom that teaches me about this divisive time in our country, which is there are people to your left and your right constantly saying, these people have stolen something from you.
Yep.
America is not the way that it used to be. You have been robbed of your honor,
Yep.
your glory, your history, all this kind of stuff, and they took it from you. This is like what our politics feels like. And then in my Star Wars fan life, this is how people talk as well. George Lucas raped my childhood.
Right. Yes.
Kathleen Kennedy and Disney stole Star Wars from me. They ruined it. And I looked in the mirror on this for a little bit. Like I talked to my daughter about it, who's a huge Star Wars fan. And I just went, no one can take this away from me. And I am responsible for my own feelings about Star Wars and my childhood. And if The Last Jedi is bad, I can either let that consume the way that I think about my childhood and the
Mhm.
canon, or I can go, not a great movie. Moving on.
It's kind of what I did.
Like for some people, this is really all consuming. And when Disney or Marvel make a bad movie or they mess up a character, which I get is like really, really devastating to people when they mess up a legacy character like Luke
Yeah.
Skywalker or Han Solo or whatever, I get that it hurts. But also, no one can actually reach inside of your chest and take your heart, unless you're the Indiana Jones guy, and be like, you know what? All of your memories are void, all of your nostalgia gone, all of your love for these childhood heroes ruined. You are responsible for your feelings.
Yep.
And I don't believe that movie makers, Hollywood, the radical left, whatever, that they can take stuff from you. You got to guard your heart and guard the things that you love. And so working through this book was kind of a nice reminder to me to guard those things. And if, something's going to make me unhappy, don't participate and focus on the things that do.
Well, the other piece you bring up, right? If you like the story, and I mean, as I used to be a huge Doctor Who fan, right? When I was younger. As I got older, Doctor Who changed tremendously, right? It wasn't the same Doctor Who to me, but I still like Doctor Who. I didn't all of a sudden decide, oh, now I hate it and it's terrible. I didn't do that, right? And the same thing with Star Wars, right? I grew up in the 70s, so it changed. But my feelings and the value that I found in, or the principles, I would say, the reason why I like Doctor Who so much, right? A little bit off, but it'll come back. The reason why I like Doctor Who so much is because Doctor Who showed that you could be smart, non-violent, and still be a cool guy. Like, and still get stuff done, right? You didn't have to be violent, and you could be smart. You didn't have to be a musclehead with a machine gun, right? And I grew up in the Rambo days, right, where everybody was a muscle with a machine gun, right? So Arnold Schwarzenegger. So that was the opposite of that. I feel like what you're talking about is Star Wars is giving you another way of looking at your principles or your ideas or your values. And if you have a strong principle or strong value, it shouldn't be destroyed because a movie's bad.
Yep.
Right?
It can't be
and
taken away.
I think you brought that idea up also, that, if let's see if I get a quote from you. Something like, I saw the interview, it was in a book, I forgot which one. You talked about the idea, if you study philosophy and you study religion, that's awesome. But if it can all be taken away from you once you see like a bad meme, then who cares? That's on you.
Yeah. And I think that does draw in the book. There's the bit about in The Last Jedi, Luke is having a crisis of faith in himself and all that. And
That's where it was from, right?
Yeah.
When he burns that's what,
yeah, he's gonna burn the ancient Jedi texts, and he's like, no more Jedi, no more Sith, any of this. And then he has a change of heart really quick, and then Yoda burns down the library anyways. The ghost of Yoda appears, and he goes, I'm going to butcher the line, but he goes, like, the girl Rey has everything within her that she needs. Like, just concerned with a pile of old books, are you? Like, the Force and the light side and knowing what is right. If these things are in you, no amount of books on my shelf are going to like shore up my moral fortitude.
Right.
I actually have to like carry these things with me and make sure that nobody can take them from me. And that's a personal responsibility issue and not passing the buck. I put it much more, I think, eloquently in the book, but yes. I hope people will give like How the Force Can Fix the World a chance this Christmas, or get it for a friend who won't stop talking about how The Last Jedi ruined Star Wars for them. Because I think this will help them see it differently and maybe think about it in a better way.
I hope so, guys. Head over to StephenDKent.com. If you're listening in the podcast, it's Stephen with a PH, StephenDKent.com, or follow on Twitter, Stephen_Kent89. Again, that's Stephen with a PH if you're just listening to this on a podcast. Chad, I want to say thank you guys for listening today and watching. I appreciate it. Your questions and comments are always appreciated. Stephen, thanks for coming on. I appreciate the time you gave me.
Hey, it was a really cool invite to get out of the blue. Thank you.
Of course, absolutely, guys. Thank you all so much. And I will be on, by the way, a TYT event tomorrow at 5:15. For those of you who want to see me there, I'll be in a debate there, and I'll be doing my special Sharp Way holiday special, noon to 3 this Friday, to my relationships, family, friends, and romance for 3 straight crazy hours, noon to 3 on Monday, the 19th. So I hope to see you guys there.